Hi everyone, this is Lauren and Adriana from winafulbright.com, and today we're going to talk to you about how you can win a Fulbright Fellowship.
You're going to learn 3 things in this talk. You're going to learn what a Fulbright is, why and how to apply for one, and strategies for winning.
So first, we want you to take away that anyone can win a Fulbright Fellowship. You don't need to come from an elite college institution. You don't need to currently be in school. You don't need a perfect GPA. And you even don't need to have a foreign language for some countries.
There are some eligibility guidelines. Roughly, you need to finish a BA before you go, and you can't be more than 5 years out of your BA, and you can't yet have finished a PhD. However, requirements vary by country, and you should look at those on the Fulbright website. There are many, many types of awards. The Fulbright program was started 60 years ago, and it awards about 8,000 grants a year. About between 1,800 and 1,900 of those grants go to students in the Fulbright U.S. student program. Those are people who are U.S. citizens who are hosted by pretty much any country with which the U.S. has diplomatic relations. The 3 major types of awards are Fulbright Research Study Grants, which can include research as well as creative awards. The second are English Teaching Assistantships, or ETAs, and the third type of grant we won't go into here, but they include named grants. You can explore almost anything, almost anywhere on a Fulbright. You can be based at a scientific research lab studying prion diseases in Spain. You can go to Brazil and study Afro-Brazilian music communities and compose music as your project. Or you can study indigenous parent involvement in children's schools in Bolivia. These are all real projects that real people have had on Fulbrights through the Fulbright U.S. student program. Also, you can teach English. And there are even a number of countries where you can apply for and enroll in master's or PhD programs.
The Fulbright is first about cultural exchange. Its purpose is to promote mutual understanding between the United States and people from other countries. The Fulbright is about working, living, learning, sharing, and exchanging experiences with people in the host country. It's not about being in a lab as an isolated researcher. It's where you get to take yourself out of the lab and actually engage in the culture you're trying to study and engage with.
Before going into the application components, we're going to tell you about the 3 questions that any successful Fulbright application answers. 1, why this country? As we mentioned, almost any country with which the U.S. has diplomatic relations can be your host country. What a successful application does is argue for why that particular country is the ideal host for your particular project. And from looking at the Fulbright website, you can tell that different countries have different priorities. You need to propose a project that aligns with that country's stated priorities. The second question that a successful application answers is, why this topic? How will you do this topic, and why does this topic fit A, both your host country, and B, you? The third question that you have to answer is, why you? What makes you uniquely suited to do that particular project in that particular country? These 3 components, the topic, the country, and why you, come together for a strong application.
The application really comes down to picking the best country and the best topic for you. And every single piece of the application, all 7 components, which we'll cover, need to speak to that you're the best person to do this project in this country. It's important to first know the country criteria and statistic. Each country has different priorities or different eligibility requirements in terms of the language or what type of projects they want to prioritize. You can also learn about the country's statistics by looking at usfulbrightonline.org/statistics, where you can see how many awards have been given out in previous years and how many people have applied. This gives you a sense of how competitive a country is, and it may help you explore different options. For example, if you're interested in working in Latin America and you speak Spanish, you can see that Argentina had 7 awards last year, but you may also be interested in Brazil. And Brazil, if you look at their eligibility requirements, will take Spanish speakers who've begun the study of Portuguese. And Brazil gave out 20 awards last year. So there's a higher chance of getting an award in Brazil. However, you don't want to apply for a country just because the statistics are better. You still want to apply for the country that is the best country and that fits your topic best. But looking at the statistics can give you a sense of narrowing down countries if you have a few options of places you're interested in.
The application has 7 components. Some of those components are quite detailed and might take longer than you would think that they could. We're going to go into those components now, and we'll tell you how they come together for your successful application.
The first piece of the application is the application form. This is online where you will fill out your school history, your work history, and your travel history. There's also an abstract of your project, and a really important part is the area on community engagement. The Fulbright wants to see here, how are you going to engage with the community outside of your day-to-day research? That could be taking a dance class or learning an instrument. They're looking here to see that you're going to engage outside of your specific project or outside of teaching English. It's also important here to speak to your future plans. What are your plans beyond the Fulbright, and how does it fit in at this time of your life to launch you into what you want to do next?
The second component is the statement of grant purpose. This component will be a little different depending on whether you're applying for a research award, a creative award, in which case you'll also have supplemental artistic material, or an English teaching assistantship. At its core, though, the statement of grant purpose is the nuts and bolts of what you're going to be doing. This can include your research methods. This can include where you are, who is going to mentor you, and how, what resources there might be at your disposal when you're there in your host country. And in the case of teaching English, you will be covering the nuts and bolts of what you can bring to the classroom, any sort of methods you might have, as well as why you've picked that specific country. You get 2 pages, single-spaced, to make a compelling case about the project itself, how you will accomplish that project, and the skills and interests that you bring to the table. Here are 2 tips. The first is that you should start with your statement of grant purpose as soon as possible. You should align your actual interests and passions and ideas with a realistic project, A, and B, you should show it to as many people as possible. You should show your draft to professors, to friends, and you should have people outside of your particular field of interest and expertise read it. The people on the Fulbright Selection Committee are not necessarily experts in your field or in what you're proposing, and in the initial screening, they're not even going to be in your host country, so you want to make as compelling a case as possible to an educated generalist about how your project is compelling, why it is important, and why you are the person to do that particular project.
The next component is the personal statement. And in the personal statement, you're not giving your entire life history. Rather, you're speaking to what are the key moments in your history and in your life that led you to wanting to do a Fulbright in this country and on this topic. Or what led you to wanting to teach English in this country at this time of your life. You only have 1 page to clearly articulate why you care about doing this project and why you're the perfect person for doing this project.
Again, you should start this early. You should show it to people who don't know you, and if possible, also show them a draft of your statement of grant purpose and have them tell you whether or not they fit together well. The personal statement used to be called, and it may still be called, the curriculum vitae. However, it is not all-encompassing. It is a targeted essay in which you speak of the particular moments in your life or your particular interests that led you to this very specific project. You can think of this as a narrative in which your character has as their next logical step in their life to do the project that you are proposing in your statement of grant purpose.
For most countries, you will be required to also submit a language assessment. The language assessment has two parts. There's a self-language assessment where you talk about your engagement with the language, and then there's also a formal evaluation done by a language instructor who speaks to your ability to carry out the project in that host country language.
Different countries and different projects require vastly different levels of language proficiency. For example, if you are doing lab-based science research, even in a country that normally requires a high level of proficiency, you may be able to have a lower level of proficiency. Alternately, if you're proposing to do fieldwork that is interview-based or archival-based research, you may need extremely high levels of language proficiency. You can also be realistic about your level of language skills and propose using part of your funding to hire tutors, research assistants, translators. For certain languages and countries, you can also apply for critical language enhancement funding, which will help you to learn languages that the State Department has identified as critical.
Here's some tips if you're a little bit rusty in a foreign language. For example, if you studied Spanish in high school and didn't take any Spanish in college, you can actually start studying Spanish a few months before applying for your Fulbright Fellowship with a book, maybe look for a community college class or a community-based class, or join an online community where you can practice your Spanish, and right before the application is due, do your evaluation.
You can also include a plan for improving your language skills between the time of your application and the time of departure within the statement of grant purpose itself. For example, you can address having a level of language skill that is less than you will need by demonstrating your commitment to improving those skills in the time period between your application and departure. A critical component of the application that might actually take as much time as writing your statements of grant purpose and personal statement is getting an affiliation letter. The affiliation letter is required for most, but not all, Fulbright projects. Fulbrights that have a predetermined host institution, as defined and detailed on the Fulbright website, don't need one, nor do the English teaching assistantships. However, the vast majority of applications require an affiliation letter from a university or other institution that basically speaks to the viability of your project and their enthusiasm to host you there. This really demonstrates your seriousness of purpose, your ability to do outreach and identify an appropriate host that matches your grant proposal. And this also shows that you're going to be able to hit the ground running and actually get things done. This is really a statement of support as well as the viability of your project.
If you have experience in the host country, you want to start with your personal network in the country. However, if you've never been to the country and don't have any contacts there, it doesn't mean that you can't get a strong letter of affiliation. It just takes a bit more creativity and outreach. So some tips are starting with people you know. Talk to everyone you know about what you're up to, and people will introduce you to people they know in the host country. Another way to start is with your own university professors. You can reach out to people you know in that field of study and say, hey, do you have any colleagues in that country? You can also talk to the study abroad officer at your university or see if there are any visiting professors from different countries at your university as a way to get started. You also have access to the great world of Google and LinkedIn. And you can start with searching different organizations and nonprofits and universities online, looking at their staff, looking at people who sound interesting to you, and just emailing them. finding their information online, and don't be shy. Let them know what you're up to and ask them to support you.
Another really useful resource is your potential host country's Home by National Fulbright Commission webpage. The different host countries usually have Fulbrights for people from those countries to come to the United States. If you can find alumni, particularly alumni who have gone to your university, it's usually easy to reach out to them and tell them that you're applying for a Fulbright. People who've had Fulbrights to the US usually love to talk with other Fulbrighters, whether they're Fulbright alumni or potential Fulbrighters, and they might be glad to introduce you to people who are doing work in your field. The sixth component of the application are 3 letters of recommendation. These 3 letters of recommendation are references that speak to your character and maturity, as well as your initiative and your ability to carry out your project in your proposed host country. Your recommender should speak potentially to your independence, to any sort of past research that you've done, to any sort of projects that you have initiated, and they should definitely, if possible, speak to the maturity and resourcefulness that you have as an informal cultural ambassador to a country where you might be hundreds of miles away from the next Fulbrighter. Even if you haven't started to write your statement of grant purpose, and even if you haven't finalized your grant topic, you should approach 3 to 5 recommenders now. Everyone writing recommendation letters likes to have enough lead time to think of good things to say. You can also give your potential recommenders more or less an outline of what points they should mention. For example, your maturity and your initiative. Your recommenders can be professors, they can be former supervisors at work, they can be people who have worked with you in a volunteer context. They should not, however, be family members. The letters of recommendation are a critical component in answering the 3 questions that make for a successful application. They should address why you and why that topic. Your recommendation letters don't necessarily need to address why that host country, but if you can find a recommender who has some sort of background and relationship to that host country, for example, an area studies or language professor at your university, they could potentially help you to complete the entire package that makes for a really strong application.
The last piece of your application are your transcripts. There's no minimum GPA required for the Fulbright Fellowship. However, they want to see how well you've done in relevant coursework to the project. You also are required to have transcripts from every college or university or study abroad institution you've participated in. And this can take time if you participated in study abroad programs in different countries. So you really want to make sure you give yourself enough time to get all those transcripts in.
Now we're going to talk about the road ahead. There are 2 major pathways for applying to the Fulbright US Student Program. One is affiliated through university, and the other is at large. If you're currently enrolled or are a recent alumnus, you will probably want to apply affiliated through university. And if you're a current student, they strongly recommend that you do so. Every campus has what's called a Fulbright Program Advisor. You should go onto the Fulbright website and find your program advisor and see what kind of deadline your university has. The Fulbright Program Advisor role varies greatly from university to university. In some cases, the Fulbright Program Advisor can be someone who can give you in-depth feedback and suggestions and really help you to craft a strong application. At other universities, the Fulbright Program Advisor processes the applications but does not give you any sort of feedback. Essentially, the program advisor can be a really big and valuable resource, or it can just be an administrative hurdle.
If you are applying through your university, the first thing you want to know is your campus deadline, which you can find online. The campus deadlines can be as early as August 1st, so you really want to know that deadline as soon as you get started on your application. The best time to start a Fulbright application is really at the beginning of June. You can give yourself about a month or so to really brainstorm a topic and a country that's going to be great for you. If you need to improve your language skills, you can also start studying the language right now and work on that language study throughout the summer before you have your evaluation done right before the application is due. Once you start narrowing down countries and topics of interest, you can start doing affiliation outreach to find that right affiliation for you. As we mentioned before, this can take a considerable amount of time, sometimes 1 to 2 months, to find the right affiliation. Then in about July, you really want to start drafting your statements and starting to put together what you'll actually be doing during your Fulbright project. If you don't have a letter of affiliation yet, it's totally fine to start writing your statements while you're continuing to find that affiliation. You also want to make sure you're starting to request letters of recommendation as early as possible. And you want to give your recommenders at least a 1-month notice, but preferably more. Then, about 2 to 3 weeks before the application is due, you want to take your time to finalize and get lots of feedback on your statements and make sure that you have checked all the boxes and you have all the pieces of the application together. After you submit your application, your university's Fulbright panel will conduct an interview with you. During this interview, there may be topical experts from your university, but mostly they're going to be looking for your ability to be a cultural ambassador for the United States. And they really want to see you speak to your ability to be adaptable and flexible and be someone who's a self-starter, who can do independent work in the country you're proposing.
The other main application pathway is at large. If you're not currently enrolled, or if you're located geographically very distant from your university, whether or not you're enrolled or a recent alumnus, you will then apply through the Fulbright website itself with a deadline of October 9th. The at-large application has one fewer component than the university-affiliated application, as there is no interview process. That means you have a little more time to brainstorm, to get your language study underway, and to do your affiliation outreach. You may want to apply at large if you need the extra time to secure the best possible affiliation for your topic. Because what you want to do is submit the strongest possible application for you.
If you're not yet ready to apply for a Fulbright this application cycle, you can still start preparing to apply for a Fulbright in future years. For example, if you're in your first or second year of university, you can choose to study abroad and start making contacts. You can start studying a foreign language. So you can already start preparing yourself to apply for a Fulbright in the future.
Submitting your Fulbright application is a valuable process in and of itself. What happens when you're proposing an independent project in a country of your choosing that really suits your interests, abilities, and skills is that you realize more what you're good at, what you're interested in, and what you're capable of. Submitting your Fulbright application is a fantastic opportunity for self-assessment, as well as an opportunity to do outreach, to show initiative, and to really make plans for yourself. Even if you don't get a Fulbright, submitting the application itself can help you to reevaluate where you currently are and where you're going.
Thank you for your time. If you come to our website at winafulbright.com, we have many more resources, including a blog and an online class on how to apply for the Fulbright, where we provide one-on-one support and feedback on your application.
You can follow us on Twitter at winafulbright, or you can email us at info@winafulbright.com. Again, thank you so much. This is Adriana and Lauren at Winafulbright.